asked you, first of all, I told you that, what is this? Are you recording?
Yes.
Video?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We have two things now. We are recording you and putting it on YouTube maybe.
No.
Or in our website.
Don't
yeah?
go. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay.
Okay.
Michael is recording your voice maybe.
Okay. So I asked you last week, anyone wanted to try being very loving to somebody that they normally had a problem with. That they had a serious problem with, maybe an argument, maybe a fight, maybe they haven't talked to them for 20 years or something like that. In other words, loving someone who's hard to love. Did anyone try that this week, before we move on to our set? Anyone try that? No one did? Did anyone think about somebody that they could try it with and they didn't try it? Anyone do that?
Yeah, I was thinking about it, but there's nobody that I don't love. So
There's nobody that Farsi doesn't love. Okay, but no one else tried that? Okay. Does anyone have somebody that they could try it with? You do? Sure. Okay, I want you to try at least imagining doing the kind of thing this week, and I'll ask you next week. I want to see what you did. But then I also asked you something else. I read a statement, a quotation here, and I'm going to read it again. And basically, it's comparing life to hunting. Okay, it's comparing life to hunting, but it uses the word game, and I'm going to read it. It says, "O beloved ones, this is the moment of the ecstasy of the soul, and the consciousness, and the season of and the season of running in the arena of sacrifice. Show ye kindness to all, be ye engaged in the refinement of the souls. Become ye as ignited lamps, and adorn ye the orchard of being. These days are swiftly passing, and this mortal life will remain fruitless and without result. Therefore, while there is yet time, and the arrow is in the bow, enter ye the chase, and strike ye the game. This game is the good pleasure of God, and this chase is the merciful providence. That is, living in accord with divine instructions." And last week I said, isn't this interesting that he's referring to life as the arrow is in the bow and strike the game. And when he says strike the game, he means hit it now. And he says the game is the good pleasure of God. He's saying that you like you're holding it and the arrow's in the bow. But if any of you have ever hunted, which I have with my grandfather, it's when the animal's in your sight, you've got to take that shot. In fact, he used to hunt elk and deer. You know how hard it is to get them in your sight? You could spend a whole week and you can never get one in your sight. You know, you get near and you get around, oh, there it is, oh, he moved. And in fact, some people even think, and actually scientists have actually tried to measure, that they think deer are psychic. They actually think they're psychic, that when you look at them, they can feel your look. And they train hunters to track a deer but never look at it. Did you know that? There's actually an art of hunting, like you look around and you're like that, because they can feel it. So when he's saying, strike ye the game while the arrow is in the bow, he's talking about something that a lot of people for tens of thousands of years understood. An opportunity comes very quickly and you've got to take it. That's what he's saying. But then I noticed, when I looked up the word game in English, I found that the word game that we use in English, like we talk about football game or baseball game or a card game, it comes from hunting. Did you know that? Because originally hunting was turned into a competition and a sport. And so I thought that this quotation, in addition, is kind of saying life is like a game. It made me think life is kind of like a game. And it became such a powerful symbol to me that I decided to write down all the ways in which life is like a game. Because how many of you play a game? Who plays golf here? Raise your hand. Who plays any well? Put your hand down, President. Who plays well? No. And who plays football, soccer, baseball? Who plays chess? Who plays any kind of game? Some of you don't? Okay, but we all know how to do it. Who watches games on TV? Okay, well that's good. Okay, so I asked you last week to say, seeing as we have this quotation, how is life like a game? I asked you to think about that. So now we're going to question that. So I'm going to ask you, what is the first question you ask if you're going to play a game? Or even you're going to watch a game on TV. What's the first question you ask?
How do you win?
How do you play?
What are the rules? Who's playing?
Okay, you said how do you win? What did you say?
I didn't, but I would say who's playing.
Okay, but let's say you know the game. Let's say you went to some country where it's a game that you'd never heard or seen before. What's the first question? What did you say?
How do you win?
And what did you say? What are the rules? They're both the same. That's pretty much the same. In other words, and I wrote here, this is what I wrote. I said, what is the aim of the game? How do you win? How do you score? Or how do you get points? Or whatever. You see what I mean? Now, think about life. If life is a game, then the first question you need to ask yourself is, what is the aim of life? And how do you win in life? How do you score? Now, if I told you that to score in football is to either kick it through the uprights or to throw a pass or to run, then you know that's the thing that will give you points. And you could only win the game if you have points. Would you agree? Now, there's lots of other things you could do in football. You could run on the sidelines, you could go get a hot dog, you could do this, you could throw the ball out of bounds. But none of those score points. Is that right? So there's some things you can do that don't score points, and there's some things you do that do score points. Now, in this game of life that we're living in right now, do you know what scores points and what doesn't score points?
Yeah.
What does score points?
Good thing. Good
Well, we're going to talk about that, but that's the first thing.
I would say it's relative though, like how do you define points? Are you talking about goodwill and good feelings? Are you talking about money? Then your aim and your rules are
Exactly.
different.
Exactly. So what I'm talking about is, what is win the game of life? In other words, when you go to the next world and the score is taken, so to speak, what is going to be part of the score and what's not? Okay,
I think
so...
happiness probably would be a big one.
Okay, so we're going to have to talk about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Right now we're just making the comparison. But you're absolutely right. There are some things that you could do in this life that we think are a way to score points, but they're not. For example, you might be playing a basketball game. You could score a point if you put it through the thing. You don't score a point if you throw it out of bounds. A lot of us are throwing the ball out of bounds because we think that's how you score points. And later on, when the score is tallied up, we may not be there. So that's a really good question, what you say. Okay, let's say you're going to play a game or watch a game. What's the next question you ask once you know the rules of the game, the aim of the game, and how you score? What's the next thing you might ask?
How long does it take?
The next thing I say to ask is, what are the tools you have? In other words, what are you given to work with? And who are your teammates? Who are you going to work with? So it's both the what and the who. In other words, what do I have to help me fulfill the aim of the game? Okay, do I have this? Do I have a ball? Do I have this? What do I have that are the tools? And who are my teammates that will, and how do I use these tools to help me fulfill the aim of the game? Now that I know the aim of the game, what are the tools? So this is the next question we need to ask in life. First of all, what is the aim of life? How do you score points? Next, what are the tools? Who are my teammates? What's the next important thing you need to ask if you're going to play a game? Absolutely vitally important.
How much time?
That's coming up.
What do you wear?
Okay, let's use that in the tools. Now I think that, but I'm putting them in order of importance. First thing is, what's the aim of the game? There's no question, and how do you score? Second is, what do you have to work with? And when I say to work with, I'm talking about the field. What's the size of the field? In tennis, okay, you have a net and you have a racket, you have a ball. In other words, all the questions of what are the physical components of that game. The third, I think, if you're going to play, is who or what are your opponents? You need to know who you're playing against. Wouldn't you agree? Mm-hmm. If you don't know that and understand it. And what do they do and what can they do to prevent you from winning the game? This is a very important thing you have to know. In other words, in all sports, they say that defense is as important or more important than offense. If you don't think about your opponent and how to prevent them or what they're going to do, you're going to lose for sure. Okay, so I want to then now, these are the three basic principles. I'm going to leave Farzians aside, the time of the game, just for the moment. These three basic principles, I want to talk about life in terms of a game. So let's first of all, What is your team? What is your team
Humanity.
in the game of life?
Family, friends?
Let's get even more specific. I want to talk about your team being the good qualities that you must acquire. They are forgiveness, generosity, joy, radiance, kindness, patience, helpfulness, assistance, love, humility, truthfulness. Well, I just wrote those down, but there's more of them. Those are your team. These are the things that you can play with that will help you score points. Any one of those team members, if you're picking a team, okay, I'll take forgiveness, okay, I'll take generosity, I'll take joy, I'll take radiance. Those are the things that will help you to score points. In and of themselves, they may not necessarily give you points, but if you use them and play with them and do them. Now, how do we use these things? How do we use forgiveness? How do we use generosity? How do we use joy, radiance? In what way do we use them? Like this is a tennis racket. How do you use a tennis racket? Can anyone tell me how to use these things? How do you use generosity in life to win points?
By showing.
Showing it? Who's got some other?
By being generous.
By being it? Okay. Actually, there are two ways. And I put it in just 5 words. Memorize these 5 words. See it and be it. Say that. See it and be it. In other words, the first thing you do is try to see these things in other people. This is the whole key to life. The key to life is to first see a good quality in a person and say, I'm seeing God. Then you can be it. In other words, you cannot be anything. How are you going to know generosity if you don't first see it and recognize it? How are you going to know kindness unless you see it? And the key to life is to look for these good qualities in everybody around you. To just take in all the good qualities. In this room, every single person has a good quality. They may have other qualities. We ignore those, like bad qualities. But they have a good quality, and we try to see it. In fact, the more you try and see a good quality, the easier it is to be it. This is the power of example, the power of learning. So if I see Farzin, and I find that he's very generous, I'm just theoretically I'm saying, then it's very easy next time someone needs, and I'm able to be generous because I think of Farzin. We do this all the time, believe it or not. If you want to be happy and joyous, think of a happy person. And just think of their face, and then you can smile and be happy to someone else. See it and be it is one of the great keys of life. First, look for good qualities in other people. That way you're seeing God, and then try and do that. Now, I'm going to ask you then, now that you understand who is on your team, who is your opposing team? Who is your opposing? Who are your other team?
All the bad characters.
Okay, I'm going to name now your opposing team. Okay, let's just say that you're playing baseball, and you have 9 players, and they are forgiveness, generosity, joy, radiance, kindness, patience, helpfulness, assistance, love, humility, and truthfulness. It's 11. Okay, so we're playing, what game has 11?
Soccer.
Okay, soccer team, that's your team. So I say, here they are. Forgiveness, generosity, joy, radiance, kindness, patience. You say, what a good team. You think it's a good team? Mm-hmm. And here comes the opponents. Here comes envy, jealousy, selflessness, pride, ego, materialism, money, power, luxury, idle fancies and vain imaginations, and superstition. Whoa, is that a good team? One time I was giving this talk to some of the youth in Los Angeles, and I read the opposing team, and one of the youth said, oh, they're going down. He said they're going down, because that's a powerful team, right? Now, the point is that if you want to play a good game, you need to know your opponent. Isn't that right? You just don't know your own teammates. You need to know your opponent. You particularly never should underestimate your opponent. This is a real thing. Never underestimate your opponent. You have to really kind of respect your opponent. Wouldn't you agree? If you really want to play. Not that you like your opponent necessarily, but you respect that they have a lot of power. Now, if you don't understand how envy works, if you don't understand how jealousy works, how selfishness works, how pride works, how ego works, and you pay no attention to it, you are going down. You have to be able to play against that opposing team. Life is a battle between this team and that team. Now, I remember reading one time a passage in which it was said that the negative qualities of the human being, like envy, jealousy, selfishness, pride, ego, materialism, these things are kind of like gravity. He compared them to gravity. Because gravity is something that never disappears. Gravity is always a pressure that's always there. And even a holy soul or a saint still has to watch for these things. In the same way that you wake up every morning, gravity is still there. You don't get stronger and stronger, and then one day gravity disappears and now you can fly. You always have to hold yourself against a constant force. And he says that these forces of envy and jealousy and selfishness and pride and ego and materialism, they're a constant force. You can't eliminate them. You only have to be strong enough to hold them at bay. Just defeat them is really what you want to do. In another place, he said a bird that is constantly flying will ever soar. But as soon as it stops flapping its wings, it goes down, irrespective of how far it went. How high it flew.
Yeah.
We're going to erase that from the tape. Okay. So, I want to ask you another thing. When you are playing a game, let's say you're a quarterback and you want to get the ball down the field. How many of you know about that? What is the first thing the quarterback does? If he wants to throw the ball to someone, what does he do?
He scans his players.
He scans his players, and what does he look for?
He calls the play.
Okay, he's called the play, and now the play's running,
He looks
and he wants to get the ball. What is he going to look for?
where he's throwing it.
He's going to look where he's throwing it, but before, is he going to throw it to any old person?
An open.
He's going to look for the right player. He's going to look for, in this case, the open player. Isn't that right? He's going to look for the open player because that's the one that he can use. He is not going to throw it to a guy. Let's say he says, oh, I want to throw it to forgiveness. And he looks at forgiveness and he sees that envy is completely covering forgiveness. These are our two players. He says, oh, I can't do it. Envy is completely doing it. So then he looks over at generosity. He says, okay, the generosity is going out to the wide. But he looks at generosity and he sees selfishness is completely covering it. You see what I mean? So he tries to look for the good qualities and try and do that. This is what we need to do in life. We need to look at what is open in our life. What are the open players? And what are the players that are being kind of covered or well defended by these other things? It's a very good model for life. Would you agree? Because now suddenly you realize that life is a constant battle between the higher nature of human beings and the lower nature of human beings. And this is what we call the dual nature of our creation. The dual nature we have been given as a struggle so that we can overcome. It's not like it says that we were created in the image of God. You know, all the religions say that. Yes, you were created in the image of God, but in order for that image to become clear, you need to purify yourself from these other forces. And the whole purpose of life is like a video game or a flight simulator to go through practicing that. Now, sorry.
The same way that you say gravity is always there, that these are the bad things that is pulling us down. Can we say the good characters are muscles that we have to build them in order to fight the
Yes,
gravity?
that's a very good analogy. If you extend the gravity analogy, you cannot eliminate gravity, but you can strengthen your own anti-gravity forces, is what Farsi was saying. In other words, we can't eliminate gravity, but we can strengthen our legs and our muscles so we can run stronger. But if we don't do that, gravity will defeat us. So I think that's very good. And you could extend that further to flying or all kinds of things. I want you to say this, is that we are playing the game every moment of our lives. And there's a chance to score every day. In fact, in every single meeting of people, you have lunch with someone, you meet someone, here in this meeting today, or you're driving the car, you're going to work, you have a chance to score some points. You know, you have a chance to score some points. And the purpose of life is to do this. Now, in baseball, they have a thing where they identify all the different kinds of pitches. Do you know that? Does anyone watch baseball? So one kind's a softball, and one's a fastball, and one's a curveball, and so on. And there's one called a beanball, where it actually hits you, and so on. This is like life. Life throws you different pitches. Sometimes God gives you a softball. Let's say God is the pitcher. And really, that's really what's happening. God is the pitcher in this thing. And sometimes God pitches you a softball. What is a softball? You can easily hit that darn thing. Okay, there it is. Bammo. I can give the love. I can give the kindness. I can give the so on. Other times, though, God pitches a fastball. What is a fastball?
Patience.
It's a hard one to hit. Okay, so have you ever been pitched a fastball in life? One that you have it very hard to hit? It's a very difficult thing. Maybe it's a person that's really, yeah, you can say, oh, he's a fastball. Okay, because he's hard to hit. Sometimes God pitches you a curveball. A curveball is something that you think is doing one thing and then it does something else. It tricks you at the last minute. Have you ever had curveballs pitched to you in life?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In other words, some things are easy, and you can overcome them. Some things are hard, they're like a fastball. Some things are deceptive, like a curveball. And then occasionally there's a thing called a beanball, which actually it just hits you. Have any of you been hit with a beanball in life?
No.
This is what God does to us. Now the purpose of life is to meet these pitches, is to learn how they work. And if you go and study how any baseball player hits, they work just on recognizing each of the different pitches. Because if they don't recognize them, they do all the wrong things. For example, they learn how to hit a fastball, and they practice the fastball. And then he'll throw a different kind of ball. It won't be a fastball, a curveball, but he thinks it's a fastball. So what does he do? He swings too early. And then he goes, chun, and then the ball goes past him. Because he didn't learn how to recognize the two different pitches. Do you see? This is the same in life. You need to learn how to recognize all of these things. How many of you...
Could you give us an example?
Okay, let me give you an example right now. How many of you, let's say something good happens to a person. They get something good, or maybe they have more than you or something, and you start to envy them, or you're jealous of them. Has this ever happened to you? Something else has happened, you start to do that. Now what happens is that you spend a good amount of your time thinking about that. And we were told 2 weeks ago that anything that you spend time thinking about is, we're told, just like planting a seed in the heart that will grow. If you spend 5 minutes thinking about something, it will have 5 minutes to grow in the heart. If you spend an hour thinking about it, it will grow more. And if you spend days and days thinking about it, it will grow more. So you were pitched the fastball of envy. And instead of hitting it, it beat you. And now, it's a week later, you have actually got a plant in your heart. The plant of envy. Do you see what's happening? And now you've got to pull it out of the heart. It's the same with ego. It's the same with pride. It's the same with materialism. Quite often, we don't even think about identifying these things in our life. We try to be good. We say, oh, I must be loving, I must be kind. But we don't also try to not be bad. Do you see what I'm talking about? This is what I'm talking about, recognizing the pitches that come into your life.
When you talk about materialism, what do you mean? For example, if a
Materialism,
person goes and hard works and wants to provide a comfortable life.
Materialism is defined as being attached to material things over and above God. It has nothing to do with enjoying material pleasures or thinking the material pleasures are good. In fact, we're told that if somebody wishes to partake of all the material things in this world, it can do him no harm as long as it doesn't come between him and God. But if you spend all your time seeking only after physical material things, let's say there's 24 hours a day, you sleep 8, so how many hours do you have? You have about 16 hours a day. And let's say you spend 4 of those hours eating. Okay, so you got 12 hours a day. If of those 12 hours you're spending all the time going after material things and you spend no time going after the spiritual things, you are imbalanced. But you should also not spend all 12 hours only going after spiritual things and go live in a cave or a monastery or whatever. That would be equally imbalanced. You need to have a life that has the correct balance of looking after your material well-being and your spiritual well-being. Right now, the majority of people spend way too much time on material things and not enough on spiritual. That's what I mean by materialism. But if you're too attached to luxury or power or money or things like this, it may also cause you to conflict with other people. And then you lose love and so on. So that's really what I mean by that. I'm going to move on. We can come back to this in a minute. I want to ask you a question. In all games, there is a big way to score. In baseball, I think they call it the home run. Is that right? In football, it's the touchdown. Or like what is the biggest home run? It's called a grand slam. Isn't that right? In golf, it would be a hole-in-one. In bowling, it would be a strike, okay? In other words, there are certain things that are the bigger way to score. Like there might be, you can score little points and a few more points, but this one gives you the big points. I want to ask you, in life, what would you say is the home run? Is the grand slam? Is the touchdown in life? Who wants to guess? And this is open for interpretation, but I have my idea.
Health.
I'm sorry?
Health.
You think health is?
Yeah, if you don't have health, then what can you do?
Okay, but I'm talking about spiritual qualities. Qualities that will help you in the next world. Qualities that will help you win this game.
Generosity.
Okay, that could be the grand. Definitely generosity is worth some points.
Oh, I think patience.
You think patience. I think patience. You think patience is generous. Who thinks will give you points?
Service to others.
Service to others. These are all, I think these are all worth 3 points. They're all field goals in my opinion. But anyway, tell me some others, yes.
Love.
Martyrdom. You know what? Martyrdom is definitely the touchdown. But the thing is that you cannot control martyrdom.
No.
And you cannot go out and martyr yourself. That would be suicide. And so martyrdom is something that's given to you. Okay, it's a special thing. So,
Love.
what would you say?
Love.
You think love. Well, how do you define it?
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice. I think these are all ways. But this is what I put down, and I'm not saying I'm right. I put down contentment. I put down contentment because there's one statement that says, the source of all good is trust in God and contentment with His holy will and pleasure. And the reason he says that is that until one learns to be content and trust in whatever God gives you, one cannot acquire almost any other attribute. Because one needs to accept life. This is the main, because if you're not content with God and His will, then you hold bitterness with you and you do all kinds of other things. So I consider that to be the highest one. Somebody else told me that they think truthfulness should be the touchdown. Because there's a statement that says truthfulness is the foundation of all the virtues. And you know, if you build a house, I mean, Steve is not here tonight, but if you build a house, what's the first thing you put down?
Foundation.
You always put down the foundation first, isn't that right? Because you can't build anything else until the foundation. He said, if someone has truthfulness, then they can acquire the other virtues, but if they don't have truthfulness, they cannot. So one person, when I was giving this talk, said, oh, truthfulness has to be the touchdown. And then somebody else said, no, it's, I don't know, everyone had a different idea. So there's really, that was not there's no right or wrong answer.
But don't you think people look inside themselves and the one that they are maybe weakest or strongest, they say that?
Yes, maybe some people, they say that when they're the weakest or strongest. I think that every human being, this is only my own personal opinion, I think that every good quality, like I picked 11 players, forgiveness, generosity, joy, radiance, kindness, I think that everybody has a certain blend. This one has more of this one and a little less of that, more of this, and so on. So I like to think of these good qualities as like colors. Do you know that light has all colors? The electromagnetic spectrum, light has all colors. If you take a certain frequency of light, like narrow it out, it's just red. Red is actually a small part of all light. Green is a small part of all light. Orange is a small part of all light. Do you understand? So God is every attribute. He's the Lord of all names. These are the colors of God. If you had them all, like if you took every attribute of God and put it, it would just be pure light. But if I take a little bit of that light, that's green, that might be... Do you see what I'm talking about? And I think every human being has their own blend of colors. It's like painting, certain colors go well together. So this is how I like to think of these, as the colors of God. And there's no question that some people excel in certain qualities and not in others. And you can do that. But I think that contentment is a key to life. If we can learn to wake up every morning and thank God for whatever happens to us today and whatever happened to us yesterday and whatever will happen to us tomorrow. He says, even if all the heaven and the earth arise against you, you should still do this. And when I first read that, I said, what are you talking about, the heaven? Okay, I don't mind if all the earth arise against me, because they're just some pretty bad people. But why would heavens arise against me? You know what I mean? That's all the good people. And he says that even if that happens, you shouldn't worry. Okay, well, it hasn't happened. Does it happen to any of you? But he says, even if it does, he says, your heart should not waver. Even if it were, if tomorrow all heaven and earth turned against you, he said, still your heart would waver. He said, oh, thank you, God. That's what true contentment is. Now, I read a statement, it was in here, and it said something very interesting. I think I read it to you before. He said, should prosperity befall thee, rejoice not. And should abasement come upon thee, grieve not. For both shall pass away and be no more. Do you see what he's saying here?
Mm-hmm.
What is he saying? Tell me what he's saying.
No matter what, be thankful.
Yes, he's saying. But he's telling you to do two things. He says, the second thing he says, should abasement come upon you, don't grieve. In other words, if bad things happen to you, don't be sad. That's not so hard really. If I think about it, a bad thing happened, I shouldn't be sad. But the first thing he's telling us is hard. Should prosperity befall thee, rejoice not. That's actually harder. If something good happens to you, to not rejoice, to not be happy, is actually harder than if something bad happens to you, to not, to still be happy. Wouldn't you say it's harder? But really, it's a key to life, because if you rejoice in the good things, you're always going to be unhappy when you lose them. Okay? If you rejoice in praise, when people praise you, when you enjoy the praise, you're going to be unhappy when you don't get it. If you enjoy attention, you're going to be unhappy when you don't get it. If you enjoy luxury, you're going to be unhappy when you don't have it. Do you see? There's a key to this. In order to be happy when times are bad, you also have to not have that other form of happiness when times are good. It's a complete detachment. And he says, should prosperity befall thee, rejoice not, and should abasement come upon thee, grieve not, for both shall pass away and be no more. So this is true contentment. We take the good in life, we take the bad in life, and we say it's all good, which is a wonderful phrase, which people say. They say it's all good. I like that phrase very much. There's another...
It's very difficult.
Okay.
Second one.
Let me tell you something that I read recently. This is in one of the passages. He's telling about life, and he says, be thankful in adversity.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what? Be thankful in adversity? That's what he said. Has anyone ever read this statement?
Yes.
He said, be thankful. I said, thankful? Okay. Do I have to be thankful? Like, couldn't you just say be begrudgingly accepting in diversity? Or couldn't you be just, be thankful? So, adversity, something bad happens to you, you have to be thankful?
Because it could be worse.
Well, that's a good technique. That's a good technique. But it's statements like these, where he says the source of all good is content with God, be thankful in adversity, that made me make contentment the home run of the game of life. That's just, I am just kind of interpreting. But there's really nothing, there's many ways to score.
Tom, I think I know I did. I read once, I read like the narratives from actual slaves and also people from the Holocaust,
Right.
and survivors and giving their account. And that was, I think that was one of the things that they attributed to them being able to pull through it. It's just making it up in their mind, no matter what, they were going to be contented with that if they knew that they wanted to get through it in any way or another, So therefore it's not finding contentment also helps sharpen your skills for survival.
Yes.
If you
I think that definitely contentment is a skill that we can all learn. Contentment is a mysterious skill, and it helps you score a lot of points. And of course, you know, when you dwell on the unpleasant things of life, when you dwell on them, they become worse. And if you think about something, you know, psychology has shown that to vividly imagine something is 90% the same as actually doing it. We talked about this. I showed you these studies of that a couple of weeks ago. That means that if something bad happens to you today, if tomorrow you recount it and go over in your mind, now it's happened to you twice, or 190%, you know, according to science. If you tell the story over and over again at every party you ever meet, okay, it's like, you know, I remember I saw a TV show and they said, we should call that person Ranch House because she only has one story. It was like a joke. In other words, she always just tells the same story. And I know people like this. Something bad happened to them 20 years ago, but every time they get a chance, they want to retell that one story. They're just a big ranch
Let me
house.
tell you how bad it was.
Okay. So the thing didn't happen to them once. The thing happened to them 10,000 times. That's why. So dwelling on the unpleasant things of life is just a silly thing anyway. It happened once. Get over it. Get over it.
I say
Three
turn the
words.
page.
Turn the page, yes.
Turn the page.
Yeah, it's like one guy said, the best thing about the past is that it's over. Okay, so this is one thing, not to dwell upon it, because there's nothing you can do about it. So I really think that this is an important thing. The other thing I should say is that all bad things that happen to you, they have a mysterious method of purifying you. They have a mysterious method of purifying. The same way that we said that, you know, Michelangelo said that the way he carved David was that he took a block of stone and cut away everything that wasn't David. That's all he did. And that's what God is doing to us. He's trying to chip away at every part of us that's not perfect in His image. And the basic chisels are tests and difficulties. And usually other people. I like to say that other people are the biggest chiselers in life, you know, because they're basically knocking away at you every time. And there's an interesting thing. There's this one book called The Seven Valleys, which talks about the spiritual path that you must go in order to become spiritual. And in each valley, he says there's a certain horse in the valley. He calls it a steed. Now, to get through a valley, you need to have the steed. Isn't that right? You have to, like, because it's a long valley. Let's say it's a valley that you can't walk through. And so every valley has its own horse. And if you have that horse, you can get through the valley. Okay. Now, what are the first two steeds in the seven valleys? What's the steed of the first valley, the valley of search, and what's the steed of the second valley, the valley of love? Okay. How many of you have read this book, The Seven Valleys?
Patience was the first one.
Patience.
The steed of the first valley is patience. The steed of the second valley is pain. The valley of love, the steed is pain. And I'm thinking, okay, so pain is like a horse that helps me to ride through life. It actually, is a horse a good thing if you're in a valley trying to get through? Is a horse a good thing? And he's saying that pain is like a good thing to get you through the valley of love. The steed of the valley of love is pain. And sometimes, I have to tell you this, I've known some people who've read the Seven Valleys and they're in great pain. They're having a real problem, and they come and talk to me and they tell me their problems. And I say to them, well, you know, the steed of the valley of love is pain. They get so mad at me. I've never once had anyone appreciate when I've said that, when they were doing it. They say, oh, shut up. You know, because they're suffering. And I'm trying to help them have a perspective that this suffering might be good. They say the steed of this valley is pain. Nobody seems to like it. So that proves to me that it's a complicated concept. So in order to explain this concept, he told a story from Islamic tradition in which there's a man named Majnun, and Majnun has this lover that he wants to find called Layli. Isn't that right? Yeah. Now Layli is a beautiful woman, and but he can never find her. And he goes everywhere. He's looking for her here, he's looking for there, and he can do nothing in life except look for her every minute of the day. Never finds her. Then this man starts to attack him. He's called the night watchman. And the night watchman is trying to attack him and kill him. And so every time he's looking for Layli, he can't find her. And then he's seen the night watchman, so he has to run away, and so on. Then finally one night, he's in a certain road, and the night watchman is running straight at him. So he runs away from the night watchman. As he runs away, he ends up like in a street corridor, and there's no way out. And the night watchman is bearing down, and is coming faster and faster upon him. Then he looks in front, and there's nothing there but a wall. And the wall is too high for him to get over. And the night watchman is back there. And so he's stuck. He's basically trapped. So he runs towards the wall, and then he turns around. And so he, with all his might, he jumps. And to his amazement, he's just able to get over the wall. And when he gets over the wall, there's Layli at the bottom of the wall on the other side. And so he found his Layli. And he said to himself, had I known that the night watchman was going to do this, I would have praised him. But if I wasn't afraid of him and running from him, it wouldn't have given me the strength to do it. In other words, it was the evilness and the fear of the night watchman that gave him the strength, because he couldn't ordinarily have climbed that wall. And then he learned later on the perspective that the night watchman was good, because he found his Layli. And so he told this story when he was talking about this valley. And so this is good. So maybe it's not good for me to tell this to people when they're in the valley. But maybe a month later, a year later, I can say it. They can say, oh yeah, now I understand. That was my night watchman. And how many of you have had a night watchman in life that now you realize it got you over a wall and you're better off for it? Who can say that? So with the perspective of time, you can see that story.
You know, when my father passed away, it was the most painful experience for me. But that time, my spiritual feeling was much, much stronger than any time in my whole life. So apparently, I realized that pain, suffering, does give something extra to those who are doing
so now, we're helping ourselves prepare for the game of life. Because I promise to each and every one of you, something painful is going to come to you between now and the end of your life. You can't go through life without something painful happening in some way. So if we're prepared to meet this pitch, this fastball or this curveball or this beanball, we'll be better. Now, Farzin mentioned something earlier, which I think is the single most important element of all games. He didn't quite mention it, but what would you say is the single most important aspect that makes something a game?
The time frame in which you have to play it.
Knowing when it ends.
Yes, let's get even more specific. You're right, but because that's what Farzin said at the time. What is the single most important element? Because when you say time frame, not all games do that.
Score?
Score is important. We already talked about that.
How do you know?
Let me put it in a different term. It's the fact that there's an end to every game. This is the important thing. All games have a set limit. They have an end. In some cases it's a time. In other cases it's a certain amount of actions that you must do. For example, in football it's a certain amount of time, in basketball it's a certain amount of time. In golf it's a certain amount of holes that you play, or in bowling it's a certain amount of frames that you bowl. Do you understand? Would you agree? Now, if there were no end to a game, would anybody play the game the way they normally play? If I just went out and said, let's just hit the golf ball whatever we want, and let's not keep score, and there will be no end, there'll be no tally at the end, would you play the same way you play if you know that every shot's being scored and when 18 holes is done, it's going to be counted up? How different do you play between the two?
You pay more attention.
You pay more attention,
More focus.
every shot counts. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. The fact that the game is going to end is the most important thing. Anyone play tennis? Have you ever gone and just hit the ball without keeping score? How different is that when they're keeping score? It's a completely different thing. Now, of course, sometimes you want to practice and it's helpful, but there's a completely different way of playing when you know that if that's out or that's in and now one score is going to be counted, that you do it. So the fact that the game is going to end, the fact that when you're bowling there's 10 frames or so on, That completely informs every single moment you play. And because of this, because of the fact that games are going to end, they have a limited duration, and you know that everything's going to be tallied up, it causes you to think that every minute counts. Isn't that right? Every minute counts in a game. If we could have this same attitude to life, that it's going to end. By the way, it is going to end. Let me get this clear. Nobody in this room is going to avoid ending the game of life. The game of life is going to end. And when it ends, score is going to be taken. And either all the opponents, envy, jealousy, pride, ego, either they scored more, or forgiveness, love, kindness, they scored more. And it's going to happen. He actually says that when you die, that God will estimate all of your deeds. So score is going to be taken. Now, if you're watching a sport game, if a team is behind late in the game, have you ever noticed that they often talk about how they missed their chances earlier in the game? Turn on any sports game, I don't care whatever you watch. If it gets near the end, it's like near the end of the game, the announcer will say they had so many chances in the early innings or in the first quarter that they squandered. Isn't that right? This is the same with the game of life. At all times you can score. You can score in the first quarter, the second quarter. You don't wait until the end. Secondly, missed opportunities will come back to haunt you. In sports, this happens all the time. You have an opportunity. Like, for example, you come to the end and you almost won the game and you remember, oh, I had that opportunity way back then and I missed the opportunity. This is the same in life. So, there's a statement I'm going to say. He says, bring thyself to account each day, ere thou art summoned to a reckoning. For death unheralded shall come upon thee, and thou wilt be called to give account for thy deeds. So basically he's saying keep score. And when you play golf, do you score every hole? Okay, and do you know that the score is being taken? And doesn't it...
If my partner doesn't, I make sure that it doesn't.
Yeah, and if your partner doesn't. In other words, you take great... Now, if you watch basketball, or if you watch... don't you keep an eye on the score at all times? Sure. If you come in to watch a game and it's already on, what's the first thing you ask the people? You say, isn't that right? Because we need to know this. How many of you keep score in your life? What's the score today? And are there any opportunities to score some points today? Oh, I'm going to go to Vanderbilt and I'm going to meet so-and-so. Can I show them a bit of love and compassion? Somebody is in the hospital. Can I go and visit them? That's it. By the way, that's a great way. You want to score some easy points? Go and visit the sick.
Now, isn't there a danger of falling into legalism? For instance, the Pharisees in the Bible, they kept the law almost to the letter.
Yes.
But it was motivated by the wrong thing.
Yeah, you get no points.
Right.
Okay, you get no points.
Because there has to be a change of real.
In other words, you can only score real points. Okay, is there any equivalent in sports where it's not real?
Or a cheat.
A cheat? Yes, absolutely, you're right. No religion, no spiritual practice can ever fall down into blind ritual and just doing something. In other words, it must be genuine love. It must be genuine courtesy. And it can't be out of self-interest, like, oh, I'm just doing this so I'll score some points and I'll go to the next world, because then you just kind of blew it. Do you know what I mean? So absolutely, I agree with you. You cannot get into a league. And this is a problem that some religions have fallen into difficulty, like Islam. They kept writing these things down. So I am just taking this analogy in its broad context, that we understand. There's one passage he says, free thyself from the fetters of this world, and loose thy soul from the prison of self. Then he says, seize thy chance, for it will come to thee no more. He says, seize thy chance. In other words, seize your opportunity, for it will not come to you again. How many times at the end of you could have said that on the end of the fourth quarter in a football game, or the last stroke of the 18th hole in golf, you could say, you should have seized your chance, because now you don't get your chance anymore.
Doesn't also Baha'u'llah say that do things not of the fear of hell or the reward of heaven? So it means that our motivation should not be neither fear or reward, but it has to be for the love of God.
Yes, what he said is, he said that nobody should do anything except for the love of God. Nobody should do it. If you do something for fear of hell, as you said, it's a more of a mechanistic thing. And if you do something for the rewards of heaven, it's also not there. Not that there might not be a punishment for doing it, or there might not be a reward for doing something. But he says your motive should be just for the love of God. Your motive is that you love God and you do it for love of God. And he says, observe my commandments for love of my beauty. And this is a very important thing, because it's the beauty of God that you love. And what is the beauty of God? It is forgiveness, it is kindness, it is mercy, it's tenderness. In other words, when I see the word beauty of God, I see the attributes of God. They are the only way we can know His beauty. If you love those things, then you can do those things. So it's focusing on attributes that causes you to be able to score these points. I keep saying this in all my lectures, that until you learn to see good in other people, you cannot be good yourself. You have to learn to look for it in other people. And I like to always say, look at when you go and shop for a new car that you've never seen before, like you go and shop and you go to the car dealer and there's some car, and you look at the car for 5 or 10 minutes. When you drive home that day, you see that model car passing you on the road. Does it happen to you? Yes. Or maybe your friend bought a new car and you'd never seen that kind of car. Now you see it and you say, but that car has been passing me all the time, but I never noticed it. And this is like God. His attributes, beauties of God, are passing you every day in the form of people, but we don't notice it. It just goes past us like cars on the highway until we learn to focus on them. And all you have to do is focus on it a little bit, and then suddenly you see it. Once you start seeing it, then you can start being it. This is how you love the beauty of God. But you said, this is your motive now, because now I become in love with beauty. And I equate these beautiful things with spiritual powers. That's what they are. Now, I want to finish now because Farzina is going to kick me out, even though we started 15 minutes late. So there is one...
10 minutes already over.
I know, but we started 10. So I'm just going to finish with one more point. There's only one more point that I want to say, is that what is the primary quality that, that characterizes someone who excels in a game, in sports? What is the primary quality?
Perseverance.
I think that's pretty
Love.
close. Not just perseverance, but even more than that.
Love. It's love of the game.
Skill.
Skill.
Oh, yeah.
Passion.
Training and
Yeah,
skill.
right.
probably.
In boxing, they call it heart.
I think you're getting close. We're trying to grab a nebulous thing, but there's a certain undefinable thing that I would say is enthusiasm, is eagerness, it's all of these things tied in one. And many people have said they're not sure if those that are excellent at a sport had the natural ability or they had this first and that gave birth to the ability. Because you can't tell. Look at Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or Tiger Woods or something like that. You say, oh, they're just naturally gifted. But in fact, you'll find that they practice more than the people that are not. Kobe Bryant, they said, he shoots, shots like 6-7 hours a day, and people that are not half as good as him don't. So who's to say which came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it the eagerness and the enthusiasm, or was it the talent and the skill? In fact, there was a famous pianist, a very famous story. I think it was, it was Chrysler, the violinist, and he played perfect violin. And after one of his concerts, a lady came up to him and said, I would give my life to be able to play like you. And he said, Madam, I did. He said he did give his life. In other words, she just thought she would give her life if she would just be given the free gift of being able to play like him. He said, no, I gave my life to be able to do this. It's this particular indefinable skill that we so admire when we see an athlete. We even admire it in a horse race. We say the horse has it, isn't that right? This is the first thing you must have if you want to win the game of life. You need to have a certain kind of thirst, a certain kind of eagerness that this is what I want, because that will lead you to all things. And I read you this quote. It came from Rumi. Remember I read you these quotes from Rumi? There were two. And they were all about thirst, because Rumi, the great Persian poet, actually I found out later that he was actually born in Afghanistan, but it was
part of Iran.
It was part of Iran at that time. So I just want to say that. But anyway, he said, "Seek not the water, but thirst, and from the very ground the water will burst." He says, you don't have to look for water. All you have to do is find thirst, and then the water will just come out. Isn't that an interesting? And another one, he said, "Not only the thirsty seek the water as well seeks the thirsty." So basically what he's saying here is that it's this thirst. And if you listen to any good coach when he's talking to his team, the greatest coaches, they don't as much tell them how to play as how to think and how to feel, to give them that eagerness, to give them that thirst, to give them that longing, to give them that drive. And that causes them to have a certain kind of resilience. And it wouldn't matter what happens to those. You know, the really good players of any sport, doesn't matter what happens to them. They have this resilience because they have this kind of thing. So I think that there are many great analogies between a game and life that we can learn from. And I was trying to think, well, what is the most spiritual of all the games? You know, of all the games, which one is the most, I'm like that. And I was thinking, first of all, that in Arabic numerology, you know, because the Arabs, they put a number to everything. The number 9 was always considered the greatest number because it contained all other numbers. Do you understand? Because any other number doesn't contain, but 9 is because now it goes back to 0, so 9 contains all numbers. So 9 was the symbol of unity, and it was the symbol of perfection because it's the highest of all the digits, and it was a symbol for God. So I thought, in that case, if in Arabic numerology the number 9 is the greatest, then baseball has to be the most spiritual sport, because baseball has 9 players on each team. It has 9 innings, you know, that you play. And the bases are 90 feet apart. Did you know that? And so I thought baseball has
Only 9 people watch the game.
Yes. But then I also thought it's very spiritual because the whole purpose of baseball is to get home. You know, so, oh, baseball's